Welcome again to the official Colorado Sports Hall of Fame podcast. I'm Dave Plati.
And I'm Jim Saccomano. We are your co hosts with over 90 years of experience combined working in Colorado sports. Myself with the Denver Broncos, and Dave with the CU Buffaloes, and both of us with the iconic Denver Bears, among our many other experiences.
We have been revealing 150 significant moments in Colorado sports history. The state's 150th birthday is fast approaching on August 1st, the date in 1876 that Colorado was admitted to the Union as a 30-day state. A veteran committee ranked the top 50 of those moments, all called from over 2,000 that have been collected. Those were ranked by 19 people on a certain special committee with over 800 years combined of covering and/or working in Colorado sports.
We are now into the top 10 of those moments, as we have covered numbers 9 through 150 in our previous podcasts. The top 50 moments were debated and then ranked by the committee. For numbers 51 through 150, we covered all areas of the state and most, if not all, sports, but were all still very significant moments. All are archived on the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame website with our podcasts. Just go to coloradosports.org, click on the menu bar, and then top 150 moments or podcasts.
But first, here's a couple of moments in Colorado sports history that weren't in those 150.
On September 3, 1967, the Broncos opened the 67 AFL season with a 26-21 win over the Boston Patriots before a record crowd at Bears Stadium, 35,488, intercepting 6 passes, a team record to this day. I was there. I was a season ticket holder at that time. The last interception was by Goldie Sellers, provided the winning points as he returned to 24 yards for a touchdown. Number 1 draft pick Floyd Little from Syracuse rushed for 66 yards in his pro debut, with Steve Kenzie throwing 2 passes, 2 TD passes to Al Denson, who's one of our 100 greatest Broncos.
There's quite a few names to the past in that little blurb, eh?
Yeah, there are.
And on September 22nd, 1974, the NFL had approved overtime games beginning in the 74 season, and the Broncos and Pittsburgh dueled to a 35-35 tie in the first ever overtime game, which occurred the second week of the season. There wasn't another tie until week 2 of the 76 season, Minnesota and Los Angeles, then the Rams in Los Angeles. They tied at 10.
This is Mark Johnson, voice of the Colorado Buffaloes. As we count down the greatest moments in Colorado sports history, it's worth remembering that great sports moments don't just happen. They're built on preparation, resilience, and staying healthy. And in Colorado, a great sports moment can mean something different to everyone, from Hall of Fame athletes to anyone who simply wants to keep moving. Whether you're chasing championships, personal bests, or just a pain-free morning run, the team at CU Sports Medicine and Performance Center delivers exceptional sports medicine care, from prevention and recovery to performance. Founded right here in Boulder, the CU Sports Medicine and Performance Center brings together CU medicine providers and Boulder community health clinicians to provide comprehensive care that's close to home and rooted in the community they serve. Learn more at cusportsmedicincenter.com.
And now our countdown continues.
The number 8 greatest moment in state of Colorado sports history.
On January 31, 1999, the Broncos repeated as Super Bowl champions, defeating the Atlanta Falcons and their former head coach Dan Reeves 34-19. John Elway earned MVP honors as he passed for 336 yards and a touchdown in what would be the final game of his career. He connected with Rod Smith for an 80-yard touchdown that gave Denver a 2-score lead, 17-3, in the second quarter, and his 3-yard TD run put the Broncos up 31-6 early in the fourth quarter.
It secured back-to-back titles under owner Pat Bowlen, who at the Lombardi Trophy ceremony postgame exclaimed, "This one's for John." The win capped a 3-year Bronco run with a 46-10 record, which at one time included 18 straight wins.
At this time, we'd like to welcome our guest for this podcast, 3-time Super Bowl champion, twice with the Broncos, offensive guard Mark Schlereth. Welcome to our show, Mark. and you'll have to tell us really how you got the nickname Stink.
Well, Sacco, the nickname Stink came from actually from my sister. Well, she didn't nickname me Stink, but she was telling me a story in my rookie season when I was in training camp. She was teaching at a village in Alaska called Akiachuk, Alaska, nestled right on the Kuskokwim River. And the first run of salmon, they would dip net the salmon, the native people there, and then they would have a big pit dug out. And when they clean the salmon, they'd throw the guts and everything in the river. They'd cut off the heads and they'd throw the head of the salmon in this big giant pit. And they would let the heads of the salmon rot and ferment. And then they would dig them up weeks later and eat them. And they called them stink heads. And when I was talking to my sister, I had relayed the story to a couple of guys that I played with the Washington Redskins. And instantly, from that point forward, I was known as Stinkhead, and then it obviously just kind of morphed into Stink, and that was that. That was the catalytic event that created that nickname, and that nickname has stuck with me to this day.
Mark, you're a native of Alaska, as you said, born in Anchorage. How did you come about? Were your parents longtime Alaskans? What was high school football like there? Did your dad set an example physically and help you with your confidence and weightlifting and so forth?
Yeah, my mom was born and raised in Alaska. She went to Seattle for high school, but came back to Alaska. My dad was raised in New York City, 112th and Broadway, and he had moved up to Alaska in the military. That's where they met. Football was always something that I loved as a kid. I loved watching football on television, was a huge Pittsburgh Steelers fan as a kid growing up in Alaska, because the first game in the morning, which would come on at like 7 a.m. in Alaska, was almost always the Steelers. And then the second game in the afternoon was usually the Cowboys until the Seattle Seahawks came in the league. So I grew up as a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And, one of the things that was interesting about my father is he didn't know anything about football or really sports in general. But that dude was a worker and, was a weightlifter and is still to this day incredibly physically fit. He'll turn 87. He'll turn 87 in August. But he used to have me doing yard work since the time I was 6 years old. And I would work with him for 12 hours a day during the summertime. And then I shoveled snow all winter long. And he would always talk to me about how incredibly useful this was and what an unbelievable base of strength that I was building, shoveling wheelbarrows of dirt and doing all that stuff. And, it's funny. I always thought he was full of baloney until I started playing organized sports. And then I realized he was 100% right. Everything I did, I was just so much stronger and more tied together, from my tips of my toes to the top of my head, because all I'd ever do was, like wheelbarrows of dirt and, putting in lawns and building barns. And I'd be on one side of a 300-pound railroad tie and he'd be on the other side as we were putting it in his flooring. And, I'd be 9 years old lifting that stuff. And so I was always, freakishly strong. And it served me well as I started playing organized sports, because I was always one of the strongest, fastest, just most gifted athletic kids. And a lot of that was because of all the work I always constantly did.
As you were winding down your career with the Broncos, I don't know if you remember, you had a fullback named Brandon Drum. He was from Anchorage, and Brent Musburger gave him one of the coolest nicknames ever, called him the Alaskan Assassin.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things they called Trajan Langdon as well. He grew up in Alaska and obviously went to Duke and was a great basketball player. But I do remember the fullback Drum. And yeah, he was like, that was a fun time and always fun. I always tried to follow the kids, like the Carlos Boozers of the world and Drum and some of the kids that played in the NFL after me that came from Alaska. So I always tried to follow those kids as best I could. And just, we had that kind of kindred spirit of all growing up in Alaska. A guy like Scotty Gomez that played professional hockey. So always try to follow the Alaska kids as best I could.
You find your way to the University of Idaho, have a solid college career, and the Redskins draft you in the 10th round of the '89 draft. People don't realize that Idaho has had 77 players drafted in the NFL. You and fellow lineman Jerry Kramer of Packers fame, probably the most notable. How proud are you of the fact that you represent both Alaska and Idaho in the league? Maybe the only combination.
Yeah, I listen. I'm so thankful and so grateful to the University of Idaho for giving me an opportunity. I had two scholarship offers, one to Hawaii and one to Idaho, and I went to Idaho just simply because you grow up in Alaska and you play high school football. Your season is 6 or 7 games tops, and so from an experience standpoint, I wasn't experienced as kids who played in what we call the lower 48, the contiguous United States. So those kids are playing, 10, 11, 12 games, maybe 13 or 14 if they're going through the state playoffs. So they had a lot more experience of just playing football than I did. And I chose Idaho because I thought, well, at least I can go here and play. I don't know if I can play at Hawaii. And bounced around from offensive line to defensive line to kind of defensive end and back to offensive line. Had a lot of injuries over the course of my collegiate career, but played a lot of different positions that really helped me develop. And playing defense is probably the best thing that ever happened to me as far as playing offense is concerned, because I had a great understanding of where guys should line up, what the defenses should look like. And it could always tell, even in my stance, if somebody was not in a position of strength, then something was coming, right? There was something they were brewing that was dirty. So, some type of blitz. So I had a great understanding of the game at a more global level than people that just play one side of the ball. So that helped me in my transition to professional sports. But yeah, being part of the University of Idaho and following guys like Jerry Kramer and seeing other guys go into the league has always been a great sense of pride for me. And, had such great relationships. And it's one of the things I feel sorry for the kids that have the NIL stuff that they're dealing with and transferring from school to school to school, chasing dollars. I just got back last weekend from a reunion with my college teammates. 26 straight years we have gotten together and spent a long weekend together from Thursday through Sunday, just reminiscing and hanging out and being on the boat and barbecuing and doing all those things, playing cards and bocce and cornhole and the whole 9 yards, and, talking smack to one another and just being completely connected. And we've stayed that way because we fought through those issues that you had, changing positions and injuries and all those things. And we stayed so interconnected. And so I owe the University of Idaho a great debt of gratitude. And it was one of the great times of my life, being able to be a Vandal and spend that time with the guys that I love so dearly.
Did you take a recruiting trip to Hawaii?
Yes, I did. I did. And at that time, oh gosh, who was the head coach? Well, Bob Wagner was taking over as the head coach. He was the defensive coordinator at the time. But yeah, I went out there and spent that time out at the University of Hawaii. And the other part that made me choose Idaho is I grew up in Alaska. So I thought to myself, man, I can't wake up to sunshine, every day, 7 days a week, 365. I think it'll drive me crazy. So Idaho was a better fit. There was some snow. There was 4 seasons. There was, it just felt like more of what I had grown up in.
So do you realize, this is my wacky question that I always ask. So you're in Alaska, you go to Hawaii, you had knocked off two of the hardest states to go to if you want to go to all 50 states, and you were 17.
Yeah. Well, like everybody that grows up in Alaska, or a lot of people that grow up in Alaska, their main destination for vacation is Hawaii because it's a direct flight. It's about 5 hours. And, you just fly down to California, it's 3.5, or Seattle, it's 3.5. So for us, like Hawaii was a destination, a vacation destination. So that's where my family vacationed. And so like I had been to Hawaii, but yeah, Alaska and Hawaii, it's always, when I meet people and they ask me where I'm from, I tell them Alaska. It's always somebody's bucket list. They're always, oh, it's on my bucket list. That's on my bucket list. So I would just tell you, I was just up there. I took my wife and I took our grandkids up there. Just up there about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, visiting my father, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And if it's on your bucket list, quit delaying, scratch it off the bucket list. You're going to love it.
Mark, you split your 12-year NFL career evenly with the Redskins and Broncos, 6 years each, and won one Super Bowl with Washington and two with the Broncos. I remember when either Mike asked you or you did it yourself, when you brought your Super Bowl ring in from Washington to a team meeting and you said, this is why we play. And your leadership was incredible. Along the way, you had 29 surgeries. What kept you going? And did you ever consider just hanging it up at one point?
Yeah, well, I had talked to Mike about addressing the team. I was coming off of surgery. I was coming off of back surgery, Sacco, and I had missed a couple of games. And you'll remember we had dropped like back-to-back games, and we didn't play very well. And, it's funny when you're kind of on the outside looking in, you're spending your time in your training room, you're not going to meetings, you do it, you're just trying to do everything you can to get back on the football field. I just witnessed, kind of almost a lackadaisical approach from our players. Guys missing meetings or being late to meetings or missing workouts. And I knew how special our team was. And it was just a reminder for those guys that this is our team. And one of the things I had said, I remember it vividly in that team meeting. I was like, when you show up late to a meeting, the selfishness involved in that is beyond me. You're essentially saying that my time and my family is more valuable than your time and your family. And like, I was just incredibly disappointed in some of our guys and just wanted to remind them that, how special our team was and how important it was for us to sacrifice for one another, because we had a chance to do something that very few teams get a chance to do, and that was to win a championship. And, one of the other things I had said is this is not Mike Shanahan's team or Pat Boland's team or anybody. It's our team. Like it, and if we don't care enough to be on time for each other, then, we'll never accomplish our goal of winning a championship. And so that was kind of the direction and the onus of that talk. And something I felt was just necessary to do. And, a couple of weeks later, after 27 days, I came back to practice. And the next thing you know, I was starting in a game against, I think it was Jacksonville, where we put on 300 yards rushing in that game. And then it was off to Kansas City for that game. And, and then ultimately to Pittsburgh. And we won that AFC championship. But, it was just important to me. And, the injury thing was always one of those things that I looked at and said, man, it's a badge of honor. I'm going to go out here and I'm going to play not only hurt, but I'm going to play injured. And, I always thought I'm going to go out here and play hurt and injured, and I'm still going to whip your ass playing hurt and injured. And that was always kind of a badge of honor for me. So as long as I always looked at it, as long as I was better than the guy behind me, and as long as I was able to win on Sundays, I was going to continue to play until I couldn't play anymore. And when that day hit, it was an easy decision. There was no regrets. I never thought back and thought, man, I wish I'd have played another couple of years. I left it all out, and there was nothing else I could do. So the injury thing is, when it was time, it was time. I knew my body was telling me I couldn't compete at that level anymore. And so I got to walk away on kind of my terms. That's kind of how I looked at it.
You kind of touched upon this a little bit, but you earned a reputation with both teams about your leadership. How did those roles develop, and what did you enjoy most about being referred to as a team leader?
I was always very adamant about, about essentially making the sacrifice for the team. The team is more important than me. It's more important than any one of us as individuals. And that's one of the things I love about team sports. One of the values of playing football or another organized team sport um, is that understanding of we can't accomplish great things. I can't be great unless we're great. And like there's a lot of teams that have a lot of talent and they don't understand that value, that leadership aspect, that sacrificial that commitment to being sacrificial. And that's what really sets really talented teams apart from championship teams. And a lot of really talented teams never understand or buy into that. They have a selfish agenda and a selfish attitude. And the thing about our teams in Denver and my teams in Washington is we weren't constructed that way. And, Mike Shanahan and Joe Gibbs, were very much on the same page when it came to, how we were going to operate. Joe Gibbs used to say this all the time, and it always resonated with me as a young player. Talent will make plays in the first three quarters, but character wins games in the fourth. And if we don't have the proper character and the proper attitude and the proper willingness to be sacrificial, we're just not going to win when push comes to shove and when it becomes really important. And it was always something that resonated with me early in my career. It was the teams that I played with at the University of Idaho had that same attitude. And it was something that I always thought was important for me to carry into the teams that I played on. So that was always something that always resonated with me.
Turning toward the 98 season, the Broncos reeled off 13 straight wins, only 4 of which were one-score games. How fun was it to be so dominant? Was there an era of invincibility after John Elway rallied the Broncos from 10 down with under 7 minutes to play to beat Kansas City to win that 13th game?
Yeah, it was great to be a part of. We were, an absolute juggernaut. There's no question about it. At the same time, human nature, and how human nature is, so many people are patting you on the back that it's easy to get caught up in kind of that man, we're really good. And when you're playing like that and things are going your way, and I had the experience of having that happen in Washington, where in 1991 we started at 11-0, and little things will slip through the cracks. You'll get a penalty, an offsides, a penalty, a procedure penalty, or a holding call or something of that nature. And the coaches will say, hey, man, we're going to play a game. It's a tight game one day. And one day we're not going to be able to overcome that. Right. And everybody goes, yeah, we got you. We got you. But until it happens to you, it's not reality. And so losing that 14th game to the Giants, who weren't a very good team, was a little slap in the face and a little wake-up call. And ultimately, it was good that it happened. And it's one of those things that helps you refocus. And, of course, we went the next week and lost to the Miami Dolphins in a night game in Miami. And that game was a little bit of sabotage because I swear Mike just completely vanillaed the game plan. We didn't run anything in that particular game, and Miami beat us pretty good. But we knew we might have them in the playoffs, and that was one of those sleight of hand type of things that Mike played after we lost the first one. And of course, the result was we played them in the playoffs later on that year and beat them 38-3. So probably a wise move by Mike, but I was none too happy after that game because we got shellacked. And that game wasn't a lot of fun because we didn't have we did. I mean, I could tell you, Jim, we ran about 4 things the entirety of the game, and that game was exhausting.
You kind of just went over my next question, so I'll alter it. Let's say the Broncos had beaten the Giants. Would there have been more motivation, or would that not have planned because you're going to play the Dolphins, who are always protecting all those alums from 72 were always looking for a team to lose their first game. So I think there might have been a little more motivation to win that game. Had that been the case?
Yeah, had we won that Giants game, we'd have played to go undefeated. But again, like I said, the human nature of sports and you know, smelling your own fumes and feeling good about yourself. this game still comes down to execution, it comes down to brute force, it comes down to your identity and imposing your will. And you can slack a little bit. And like I said, that is the human nature of playing the game. So ultimately, our goal going into the season was never once going undefeated. Our goal was to win the division and to win a world championship. And we were still on track for both of those. Now, we didn't win the division. Kansas City won the division, but we still ended up winning the championship. So, like, nobody ever goes into a season going, our goal, guys, is to go completely undefeated and to win a world championship. That's to win your division, get a home field, home field advantage, get a home playoff game or two, and get yourself to the Super Bowl. That's everybody's plan.
Mark, the Jets visited Denver for the AFC title, took a 10-0 lead early in the second half. But behind Terrell Davis running for 167 and a TD, the Broncos win. Two questions here. What was it like blocking for someone like TD? And did you pretty much know it was Elway's last home game?
Yeah, I wasn't sure on Elway's last home game. I knew he had contemplated retirement, but we always felt like we can, roll him back out, and he was still playing at such an incredibly high level that I guess we were more hopeful. So we didn't really think about it being his last home game. I don't think we really discussed that. And still hoping to get him back for the 99 season, which, would have obviously been incredible to have a chance to, roll out there and try to three-peat. That would have been great. So, yeah, I didn't know that. But as far as blocking for TD, we used to say it all the time. TD would make up for a multitude of sins. And you knew if you just gave him a little bit of a crease, that guy was going to get something done that was special. And, he wasn't the biggest guy in the world. He's probably 208. I think he was about 208. But, man, he ran with such power and such determination and such fluidity. And I think one of the cool things that people don't really understand about the run game is TD was a stickler for entry points where you were going to enter the line of scrimmage, but also for understanding blocking schemes. So, like, TD could get in that backfield and look at the defensive front and sit there and say, hey, I know we're running 18 handoff, but they've got, a 25 front with a Sam on the ball over our tight end, and that guy's only job is to set an edge and force it back inside. So I'm going to press it to get the flow of the linebackers, but I already know I'm probably cutting back in the B gap, maybe the front side A gap. And so I'm really going to drive hard to the hip of the tight end, but understanding I know in almost 100% likelihood that I'm already predetermining a cutback. And so he understood the blocking schemes, and he understood the defensive fronts and where the weaknesses were, where the strengths were. And so his game was as much mental as it was physical. And because he understood it so well, he could kind of almost cheat, if you will, on some of the cutback runs, or if he's going to press and stay front side. Like, he was so good at that stuff. And that was a testament to his knowledge and his just football acumen.
I like that answer. A lot of football codes within it. So off to Miami in Super Bowl 33. Elway has a big game. Rod Smith hauls in 152 yards and a score. Davis does a 100-yard game, and Atlanta's pretty much dispatched by the middle of the third quarter. The two Super Bowl wins for the Broncos should either mean a little bit more than the other.
Yeah, Super Bowl 32 means more because, going into the week, I think at the start of the week, we're 13-point underdogs. I think at kickoff, we're 11.5-point underdogs. And, other than the guys that were connected with our organization and our families, there's not a lot of people that thought we could win that game. And we were just so good, so determined. And Mike was so good at game planning. One thing that we did, like, we really ran, like, you look at our offense in general, we really ran 5 or 6 plays. We were like, the Globo Gym of the NFL at the time. We're better than you, and we know it. And so we were such experts at running those plays. Now we would window dress with different personnel groups and different formations and different motions and all that kind of stuff. But we're running 5 kind of core plays. And then we're building off those core plays. We're building big, big potential plays off of those core 5 or 6 plays. And Mike was so good at exploiting a defense, saying, hey, man, this is the way they're going to play us. We're going to get in this formation. And 100% of the time, they're going to get into this. And this is what we're going to run. And, as a game planner, you're always looking for always or nevers. They're always in this or they're never in this. And how are we going to exploit that? And Mike was a master when it came to that kind of stuff. As a matter of fact, you mentioned Rod Smith and John Elway winning the MVP and the 80-yard touchdown as you brought that in here. That was off of pass 18 handoff, which is a 7-man protection with a 2-man, what they call a Yankee concept, with Rod Smith running a post and somebody else, probably Eddie McCaffrey, running the over. And you're trying to get isolation on the safety in the middle of the football field. And we're getting 8-man fronts in everything we do because we're so damn good at running the ball. So they got exactly what they wanted. And if you go back to NFL films, as soon as Mike called it, we lined up on line of scrimmage, Mike goes, oh, we got him. We got him. He's on the sideline going, we got him. And boom, touchdown, 80 yards to Rod Smith. Got him singled up on Eugene Robinson, playing the deep middle safety, and the rest is history. So those are the type of things that just gave you so much confidence because you knew going into a game plan, we've got him. As a matter of fact, we ran in Super Bowl 32. Terrell Davis was the MVP. He missed the most of the second quarter, I believe, and still was the MVP with 158 yards or something rushing in that game. But Mike had put in a play based on a defense that they ran 100% of the time. When we got into strong right slot, they got into a certain defense, and they exchanged the responsibility of the outside linebacker and the safety. Leroy Butler, used to come down and essentially replace the will linebacker, and the will linebacker would replace the safety. And nobody had adjusted to that formation. Nobody had blocked it. And so Leroy Butler was making plays in the backfield all the time. And Mike showed us about 15 or 20 clips one night in a team meeting, like, here's what they do 100% of the time. And watch, Leroy Butler made like 10, 12 tackles in the backfield. And he goes, we're just going to exchange the responsibility of the left guard and left tackle, or right guard and right tackle. And instead of chasing that weak side linebacker in slot formation, you're going to go up and you're going to pick up Leroy Butler. And I don't know, it must have been, 4 or 5 plays into the game. We called the play, and I'm sitting in my stance going, Zim, 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 and Zim's going, yeah, I got you. And sure enough, we run it, and I leave the weak side linebacker, and I hit Leroy Butler right in the chin, and TD cuts it back, and we get like 15 yards on the play. I remember walking back to the huddle, looking at Zim going, oh, we're going to gut these guys. Like, we are going to gut these guys. And sure enough, they never adjusted. And it was one of those things that Mike put in a team meeting that week and said, this is a play where we're going to absolutely destroy the Green Bay Packers. And it's exactly how it happened. Exactly the way he would say it would happen in a meeting, it consistently happened for us on the football field.
Yeah, there's no end to the greatness of Mike, and we'll be discussing that in a future podcast. But from you, 3 Super Bowl rings. Did you ever feel like you were underrated? I mean, I know the answer to that, but come on.
Yeah, Sacco, I had illusions of grandeur as I made a Pro Bowl in my 3rd year in the league. And, I started as a rookie, and really in 1991, as a matter of fact, there's a family called the Giddens. They put out the Giddens report. is an NFL report for executives where I was rated the best guard in football. And I really thought that I could go on beyond just being a kid from Idaho and Alaska to make it to being a Hall of Fame performer. And obviously, that wasn't the cards for me. I just spent so much time injured and playing hurt and playing injured. Um, but again, I have no regrets, man. I left it all on the field, and I never one time walked away from the game and thought to myself, and I wish I would have. I tell people this all the time, and they have a hard time believing it, but I never missed a workout. I was never late for a meeting. I was never late for anything. Um, I was a professional football player. That's what I was. And that was really important to me. And, I didn't make mental mistakes. I mean, I rarely ever had a mental bust. As a matter of fact, in my time in Denver, that's 6 seasons. You're talking about 1,200 plays a season. 65 plays a game, and give or take a few plays because of injuries and a few games I missed, but I didn't miss a lot. And I think I had 3 missed assignments in 6 years in Denver. And it's not because I was the smartest guy. It's because I prepped, I prepared my butt off. I studied my butt off. And part of that was, that sacrificial aspect to the game that I had, and the fact that I just did not want to let people down. From the guys I played with and played for, to the coaching staff, to the equipment guys, and to the trainers, man. I thought that was my responsibility to play great, and always took great pride in that.
So you retire in 2001. You went right into the sports media. Is what you had hoped to do after your playing days? And how did it come about? Because as fans will recall, the Bronco offensive linemen forbid each other from doing interviews. So how could they know you'd be as good as you are behind the microphones?
Yeah, I don't know that they knew. Really, the way that came about, I was planning on taking a couple of years to do nothing. And then my wife, after about 2 weeks, said, "You got to find something to do. You're driving me crazy." Um, but HBO's Real Sports was doing a piece on injuries and players, and the toll that playing in the NFL takes on your body. And so they called and asked if I would do an interview. And I was like, sure, whatever. And at that point, I'd only been retired for a little bit. And they sent out Jim Lampley. And Jim and I talked, and it was great. And the interview went well, and so anyhow, fast forward a couple of weeks when they get that thing on air. And after the piece runs, and it was about Jim Otto and myself and some other players that, had a lot of injuries over the course of their careers, and, living with those injuries. And, Jim was like, are you concerned or whatever, in the interview? And I was like, listen, man, I could step off a curb and get hit by a bus. I don't live my life that way. Like, am I going to have problems later in life? Probably. And I'll deal with those problems like I deal with everything else, right, at that time. But I'm not going to sit here and worry myself sick about, what have I done to my body? And like, I would do it all over again. And, and I've got issues, there's no question. But it was my childhood dream. And to live out a childhood dream, you got to make some sacrifices. And that was that. But at the end of HBO Real Sports, if you guys remember, the piece runs, and then Bryant Gumbel is sitting down with the interviewer and asking the interviewer about the subject or the person or whatever. And I'll never forget, he asked Jim Lampley, "Hey, what is Mark planning on doing post career?" And Jim said, "I don't know. But you know what he should do? He should get involved in the media because he's engaging, he's intelligent, and he's articulate." And literally the next day, that ran like on a Sunday night on HBO. The next day, my phone rang. It was an agent that wanted to represent me and already had an interview process set up at ESPN. So I was like, all right. And like a week later or 5 days later, whatever it was, I flew out to ESPN. I auditioned, and they hired me. And I'd already had another interview set up with Fox. And so I ended up doing that and doing one game in NFL Europe for Fox, and then started in July of that year, 2001, doing NFL Live, and spent 16 years on Fox. Spent the last 9 years on, or spent the first 16 years on ESPN. Spent the last 8 or 9 years on Fox, and still doing my thing.
Amazing, Stink. Tell us about Rock Hoover. Tell us the history of it, and how did you land that role? Because a lot of people watching say, "Who the heck is Rock Hoover?"
Hey, yeah, that was my little tryst into soap opera, Sacco. And funny thing, I was sitting in the ESPN newsroom, and I got this email, and it was from a guy by the name of Rob DeCina, who was the casting director of The Guiding Light. And the email was like, "Hey, man, I'm a big sports fan. I watch you on ESPN all the time. Really like your television presence. Think you have a soap opera look. Would you be interested in auditioning for The Guiding Light?" And I instantly shut down my email, and I'm looking around because I'm with Trey Wingo and I'm with a couple of other guys that work at ESPN. I'm in the newsroom, and I'm looking around going, I'm getting punked. Like somebody is trying to get me, I'm going to get really excited in here about this soap opera opportunity, and then they're just going to laugh at me and point fingers, right? So I put it away. I didn't address it. I went back to my hotel room later that evening, and I emailed Rob DeCina back, and it was legit. The next thing you knew, I was down in New York auditioning. They hired me, and for the next 2 years, I did a recurring role as Detective Rock Hoover, and it was fun. The coolest thing was getting to know some of the cast members and getting to know some of the makeup folks, and developing some friendships that have, to this day, I still keep in contact with Rob DeCina and the main makeup guy that took care of me, and a couple of the stagehands. And one of the stagehands, ironically enough, was a guy by the name, he had the last name Schlereth. And so we connected, and we were trying to find out and trace family roots and everything else, if we were connected somehow. So it was a cool, little escapade for 2 years on The Guiding Light. I enjoyed it.
What would your offensive line mates have thought if you had told them, "Hey, they told me I had a soap opera look"?
Yeah, they would have literally killed me. They would have crushed me. So, and yeah, that would have been the death of me, so to speak.
Mark, your 3 children have done some amazing things, but how cool was it, and how proud were you to see your son Daniel pitch at Coors Field during his rookie year when the Detroit Tigers visited in 2009?
Yeah. Actually, his rookie year, 2009, he was with Arizona Diamondbacks. I think that was 2011 with the Tigers when he got the opportunity to pitch at Coors. I think he might have pitched at Coors too, or yeah, he might have pitched at Coors his rookie year. But I think he might have made a trip out, but maybe that didn't get in a game. Anyhow, the 2011 is where he went in and struck out. I think he struck out Seth Smith. I think he popped up Tulowitzki, and then he struck out Todd Helton. And I will tell you, his very first game playing for the Arizona Diamondbacks in Arizona, my wife and I and the girls, our kids came to that game, and I was an absolute mess. Seeing him walk out of the dugout in, a uniform, and I just bust out into tears because I had coached him since he was 4 years old playing T-ball. And, the sense of pride and watching him trot out to throw a scoreless 6th inning. And I look at my own career and the things I accomplished and playing in 3 Super Bowls or starting 3 Super Bowls in 12 years of starting the league. those things are garbage to me compared to watching my son trot out and throw that scoreless sixth inning. And so that was absolutely incredible. The other thing that was incredible in that game in 2011, I believe it was, where the Tigers came into play, the Rockies, and Daniel had a great outing in that particular game. I was down in the tunnel after the game and had seen Todd Helton. And Todd and I had been friends since we were both playing. And at the time, I used to take Daniel down to spring training. And Todd, being a lefty, would always give Daniel lefty first baseman mitts. And so Todd has known Daniel since he was, 12, 13 years old. And Todd comes busting out of the tunnel and he is livid. He is so pissed off. And he sees me and I smile and I give him a hug. And he's still just seething over getting struck out by Daniel. He's like, I can't believe I gave that kid those mitts. Like I am so pissed off right now. Like it really got him. And it was funny. Then we just kind of laughed about it, because Todd was, really hard to strike out. And it was a great battle. And he fouled about 4 or 5 pitches off. But it was just a huge highlight for me. And obviously, for Daniel being able to pitch in the big leagues for 4 years before injuries kind of shut him down and shut his career down. But man, what a fun time that was for us as a family.
That was great. Stink, you were great. And we really appreciate you taking the time out to join us today. We really do, genuinely.
Thanks, Mark.
It's my pleasure, guys. Always great to get connected, and look forward to the next time.
Super.
Great.
We'd like to thank our sponsors, Pasta J's at 10th and Pearl Street in Boulder, C Sports Medicine, the Colorado Collegiate Chronicle, and Mark Johnson for introducing each moment's number.
We do hope you're enjoying our podcast, reminiscing with our trips down memory lane in the state's sports history. That's a wrap on our 40th podcast. A reminder, though, the Hall of Fame offers tours of its museum and the stadium, as well as Empower Field at Mile High.